Hello, everybody. This is episode 15 of the Art of Dubbing Shared Secret from the Transperfect Media Dubbing Academy. And I see that Alejandro is already joining. So we are going to let you in. How do we do that? Alejandro joined. No, c'est Adonia. Alejandro join. How do we do that? Invite. A little technical problem at the very beginning. And here he is. Perfect. We are
Hi.
live. Hola,
Yes.
Alejandro. ¿Cómo va?
Hola, hola. Muy bien, muchas gracias. ¿Cómo?
De nada. Un placer. So,
Igualmente.
let's continue in English for all our followers. And my Spanish is
Okay.
not great neither, so don't worry about that. So very happy to have you for tonight's live event. Normally
Mhm,
we do that once a month, but
mhm,
the last 2 months we had to cancel the live event because I traveled a lot lately. I was all over
mhm,
Africa, and so I was not really ready to do live events. I've been practically everywhere you can imagine in Africa, so that was interesting. And the Dubbing Academy is doing very well in Africa, so we can talk about that later. But right
Right.
now, let's concentrate on Latin America,
Yes. Yeah.
another southern continent,
Yes.
which I know very well because I come from Warner Brothers, and we released a lot of movie in Brazil and in Mexico,
Mhm.
um, and so I mean in Mexico in Latin Spanish. Um,
Yes.
and a lot, and I want to talk to you about that, and we can start with that because I know from experience that a lot of movies are dubbed in Latin Spanish in Mexico. But tell us a little bit about Buenos Aires because you are from
Mhm.
Argentina, and and most of the majors have a little bit of an issue with Argentinian dubbing. It was the same thing with the French and Belgium. When the French started to do dubbing in Belgium, because it was more interesting, giving more versatility, more different voices. Unions were less complicated to deal with that in France. So 15 years ago, a lot of French content was dubbed in Belgium. But at the beginning, it was a little bit a change. So tell me about the transition from the dubbing historically from Mexico to Argentina.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. I hope you
Thank
can
you.
understand me. My voice is not in a very good place now. I'm a little bit sick, so
I can
it's
hear
kind of funny.
that. We'll be okay.
Yeah. It's fine. Okay. I'll play the Godfather now that I have this voice. Yeah, the tradition. Well, in Argentina, dubbing in Spanish started in Argentina early in the 20th century. We had a lot of experiences here. There's a very famous case, which is the Disney movie Pinocchio, which was dubbed into, we could say, Latin Spanish, but back then there wasn't a concept of Latin Spanish. They just dubbed it in Spanish, and it's the only movie that still has the same dubbing. It still has the Argentinian dubbing from that era, from the 1940s, and it sounds kind of it sounds in Argentinian, mostly how we talk here in Buenos Aires, in Rio de la Plata, but in a kind of an ancient and extra correct way. So it's a very special case, and everybody in Latin America grew up with that version of the movie,
Yeah.
and they love it. But later on, well, because of business between Mexico and the United States, dubbing started to grow a lot more back there in Mexico City. And well, they started working more and more and more, and their industry grew a lot, really, really a lot. And nowadays, I always say Mexico is the mecca for Latin dubbing here in Latin
Yeah,
America.
I,
They're
I
the greatest.
remember. I remember when we were dubbing the movie when I was at Warner. It was always the number of prints that my
Mhm.
colleagues were manufacturing before we went to digital, early 2000. The number of prints was huge in Mexico, and after you had Colombia, Chile, Argentina, but it was much lower number of prints. It was like
Mhm.
less cinemas, if you want. Although the country is not smaller, but you had much smaller number of prints manufactured for Argentina than for Mexico. Mexico was the highest number of prints, and Mexico is in the it's in North America. It's not in South America, if you want. So
Yeah.
there is also this concept of closer to Hollywood. You know,
Yeah, this is a very special case because we in Latin America we compete against each other in the dubbing industry,
absolutely.
but we're such a huge territory. I mean, I always sometimes I speak with some friends from Spain, and we always put the case like, okay, in Spain they all dub the material for themselves. In Brazil, they dub the material for themselves. Here, we're dubbing for millions and millions and
For
millions of people
20
all
countries.
over. It's such a crazy thing, you know. Um, but at the same time, that made us become uh, like to lose our sound, you know, like Argentinian dubbing doesn't sound Argentinian. We have to sound Latin, what we call neutral Spanish, right?
Correct.
Uh, so in regards to that, I think that Argentina started becoming a stronger player in this industry during the 90s and the beginning of 2000s.
Yeah.
I think that there were a lot of generations who grew up watching dubbed movies and series, and they began to work their hearing and their practice, and they understood more about Latin Spanish. So when they started to work, they found themselves more comfortable acting in another language, let's say, right?
Yes.
Um, so I think the industry here in Argentina grew exponentially from the 2000s onwards. And well, yeah, nowadays there's a lot of work, but not as much as a couple of years ago. We also had here some conflicts in regards of strikes, actor strikes.
Yes. Yes.
There were, I mean, you know, almost everyone knows that Argentina is now in an economic crisis, in a big economic crisis,
Yeah.
and this has been happening through the last 10
I
years.
know.
So it's a going for it. Sometimes we are cheaper, sometimes we're super expensive, sometimes we need to ask to beg for some changes on our wages because it's unbearable. So that was really something that attended against us, you know, against our industry. So yeah, we're there, we're hanging there, and well, also now after the pandemic, we started working a lot virtually. So we started working for other countries. In my case, I record for Mexico, for Chile, for Miami. There's a lot of cases in which we have become international. Why? Because we work for a whole region and we
Correct.
don't work just for countries.
Correct. And
Um,
that is exactly what happened. I remember when I did one of the first movie in Canada, in French Canada.
Hmm.
in French, in Quebec, in Montreal. So I did one of the animated movies. I don't remember which one. And so I go there and I talk to everybody, and they have a Canadian accent, a little bit like the Argentinian have an Argentinian accent compared to the
Hmm.
Mexicans. But we go to the studio, and that's it. No more accents. And I was
Yeah.
really amazed. I said, how do you guys can do that? Because in 1 second they were speaking like me, like French, and they lost their accent. So, and they explained to me that they are trained to do that. To lose their accent, to they worked on a neutral accent, and I think this is key for you guys to be able to exchange like that region to region, unless and after we can. So this is the accent. I would like to talk to
Hmm.
you also about the adaptation, because you
Yeah.
are an interesting profile, because you do some direction, you do some acting, you do some translation adaptation, you teach. See, I did my homework. So great. Congratulations on everything.
Thank you.
Now, I remember one of the last project I did on an animation was a movie Storks. I don't know if you remember this movie.
Hmm.
Stork was a big animation movie, and we did that in Latin Spanish.
Hmm.
So a general version for all Latin America, but we had a specific version because you had two heroes, two main characters in the movie, and the rest of the incidental characters. So we did a normal version for everybody, and the two characters, the two main ones, we did a special version for Chile, for Colombia, and for Mexico, because Mexico, they also have their Mexican slang.
Of course.
So we did in fact four versions: a neutral version, Mexico, Chile, and Colombia, and Latin Spanish. And it was not about the accent; it was about the adaptation, the translation, you
Yeah.
using some expression that are proper to this culture. So tell me a little bit about the different cultures in Latin America, and how do you approach the adaptation depending on
Hmm.
where the movie is going to be released.
Well, of course, most of the dubbing we get in Latin Spanish is from Mexico. They have the biggest amount of works. So it's kind of, we grew up from the 80s onwards. We grew up listening to a lot of Mexican Spanish, and maybe not in the 80s, but during the 90s, they started using more words from the Mexican slang, so we understand it, and it doesn't bother us. And more we have been learning a lot of words, because sometimes we get a movie made in Colombia, or a series made in Colombia about something that happens in Colombia, so we learn about their slang. We learn about the slang in Venezuela, we learn about the slang in Chile. So of course, globalization has taught us lots of those words that maybe before we didn't understand.
Yeah,
And of course, that happens with Argentinian slang too. But when you're watching something dubbed in Latin Spanish, it's kind of weird. When any character speaks with a different accent, or with a very specific slang, we understand it, but it's like, whoa, this is weird. It's like we grew up with this neutral Spanish that I personally call the TV language. That's the TV
for
language. It's a language that
everybody,
doesn't
common to
it
everybody.
doesn't yeah, that's it. It's not a language that it's spoken in some country. It doesn't belong to any country. It's just a region that has, they shook hands and say, okay, let's record in this language so everybody can understand. Of course, there's a lot of things that get lost in translation, because
Exactly.
you need to make an adaptation so that everybody can understand it. So there's a great hardship, and sometimes nowadays, in modern times, you can make a choice to, okay, I'll adapt it a little bit in Argentinian, or I'll go with the Mexican, which is better known and better understood.
Yes,
So,
because you are losing a little bit the identity of each country if you have a
yeah.
common vocabulary for everybody. You know the jokes, jokes about sport, joke about culture. You cannot please everybody if you start doing
No.
compromises like that. So, do you think? And that's another question because I was in Africa lately, and in Africa they have much more languages than in Latin America. It's really different languages. It's not variation of Spanish, besides Portuguese, obviously. But do you think that um, all these different um, variation of the Spanish contribute to separate a little bit more the culture? Because in Africa, they were telling me it's difficult to have an African identity because we all speak
Hmm.
different languages. So
Hmm.
they have common languages. French and English are very present there, but just in Kenya, I was in Kenya. Everybody speaks three languages: so English, Swahili, and their own tribe. And plus, some people speak four, five languages, and they have a zillion of languages in the country. So it's very difficult to unite people. Do you
Hmm.
think that all the different variation of Spanish are a little problem to unite the continent, or do you think Spanish is enough because it's still the same language?
No, I think that we are united in that aspect. I don't think there's a barrier, you know? The most difficult thing, of course, is when something speaks um to you in a way that is so pertinent to that region or to that country that of course you're going to understand it because you grew up with that, but someone from Chile is not going to understand it if you use a lot of slang words, or if you, there's always the case, we always speak about this. During many years, dubbing made the poorest, more ignorant person speak the same that the rich millionaire who was the owner of the country that they were working
Yeah,
in. Because neutral Spanish made those characters speak the same so that it could be understandable.
correct.
Even though in the original version they didn't speak the same, we had to do that because those were the laws of dubbing, you know, to make it more understandable, more affordable for lots of people. Nowadays, we're trying to break a little bit those barriers and allow ourselves as directors, as translators, as adapters to to change it a little bit so it can, you can understand that okay, this person doesn't speak as fluent or as correctly as the other one. Okay, but it's still understandable. It's very difficult when you have to choose, when they tell you, okay, so this character has to be, he has to have a use of slang, an abusive use of slang. It has to be from the streets, you know, from the barrio. It has to be a character that people can connect with, and you go,
Yeah,
okay, how do I do that so that people from all Latin America can connect with that character?
that's a
So you make,
challenge.
so you make a choice,
Yeah,
and that choice will probably offend a lot of people and will probably be good for a lot of people too. So it's kind of, you know, you have to have a lot of knowledge. You have to, as I always say, you have to know how to investigate. You have to know how to Google things so as to investigate a little bit and to find out, okay, what can I do? What choices can I make so I don't offend
yeah.
anyone? That's why I also have connections and friends in Colombia, in Chile, in Venezuela,
You
in
have
Mexico. So when
to.
I'm
Yeah,
adapting some material, I'm like, hey, can you read this? What do you think about this? Because also a very problematic thing we have here is that maybe a word that for us in Argentina is a common word, let's say, I don't know, a piece of clothing, that same word is an insult
yeah,
in Mexico.
yeah.
So you cannot use it because when you use that, people watching in Mexico are going to go crazy and they're going to go,
Correct.
no, what?
So you
You
have to
know?
be aware of what you are doing and how it translates in all the different countries.
Of course, of course. And well, nowadays, of course, there's a lot of projects that belong to franchises or are based in comic books or something of the sort. So you have to be very, very attentive to those details, and you have to understand what you're working with. Recently, we had a very wonderful experience. There's a very famous anime series, a Japanese series called Captain Tsubasa, which is about football. And this has been an ongoing series for many, many years since the 80s. And there's a moment where they are playing like a World Cup and they play against Argentina. And this project was being dubbed in Mexico. And the director called us, some actors from Argentina, and he told us, look, I want the Argentinian players to speak in Argentinian because they are from Argentina, so they should sound Argentinian. So we did that experiment, and gladly audiences took it. They laughed a lot at the situation, but I think we did it in the most respectful and the most artistically correct way, as to not be something that could be offensive,
Sure,
because
sure,
uh,
sure.
lots of people could have said, "Hey, this sounds like an exaggerated Argentinian accent." We had to be careful with that,
Yeah,
but it was fun and it was new, and it's something that I think could happen more and more. That maybe if in the original material, as you said, let's say that there's a movie where everything happens in France, and there's a moment that a Belgian character appears. He speaks in French, but they understand each other, but he has a different accent.
exactly,
How could we translate that into Latin Spanish?
exactly.
Where, if everything is dubbed in neutral Spanish, this character that appears that has a differential accent, okay, where should we make him from? From Mexico or from Argentina or from
Correct.
Chile or we just dub him in the same register as the other characters. There's a lot of decision making in regards to that, and of course we answer to clients, we answer to studios, but mostly we answer to the audiences. And I think what we do has to be something that audiences appreciate and that doesn't interfere with the enjoyment.
With the
We always
movie,
say
with the intent of the directors, obviously. Tell me a little
exactly.
bit about the process of translation and adaptation. A lot of people are a little bit confused between the two steps. Um, you know, and that depends on the country. You have a country where you don't even have translator, you have only adapters because they already know that to dub a movie you need to adapt. And countries like France or Italy, they can adapt directly, they don't need translator. Some countries where the English is not mastered as well. In Asia, in Eastern Europe, you have translator that do a first pass of the translation, and after adapter working on the lip sync. What's your what is the trend in Argentina? You adapt directly, or you do a first pass as a translation?
Personally, I like to work with of course with the original script, but I mostly listen to what I'm watching. I speak English, of course. If the material is in English, I can work with that.
But you speak
Um,
English very well, so you don't really need to have a translation before you do the adaptation. So in your
it
case, you
only
probably
helps.
adapt directly.
Yeah. It only helps when something is very very slangish, or it's there's a very noisy scene, and maybe you what did they say here? But of course, using what's happening in the scene, you can decide or you can understand. But yeah, of course, personally, I always like to think that an audiovisual translator or adapter has to have a little bit of a script writer soul, to be creative and also to
Absolutely
understand this media. I mean, it's appalling how lots of people that dedicate themselves to this industry, they don't watch movies and they don't watch series, and I
correct.
and I cannot understand that. You need to understand the media you're working with, and what the audiences expect. Um,
Yeah, you
I
need
always say
you need to be a writer, and
exactly.
in most of the countries we have the actors and the translator adapter sign AORs, assignment of rights, and in our AORs, the translator is considered as a writer, or the adapter is considered as a writer because you have to write a new story that's going to fit the lips movement, and sometimes and you speak Spanish. I'm from France. I can tell you that all the Latin languages are probably 20% longer than English. English is a
Mm.
very concise language. So if you translate, you are always going to be too long. So
Yeah.
you have to rewrite anyway. And sometimes maybe in this series of live event, I already mentioned that, but I remember one time it was on Ocean 12 or Ocean 13. The boss is on the bed and he's very sick, and they come to him and say, "Give me your signature." But in English, they didn't say that. They say, "Give me your John Hancock." So
No.
obviously, I had a ton of questions from all the studios worldwide. They say, "What is the John Hancock?" And if you are not American, you don't know that John Hancock was a signatory of the Constitution. You have no idea. So for the American, give me your John Hancock means give me your signature, your autograph, if you want.
Hmm.
So that's why you have a lot of annotated scripts where you can explain this kind of expression. Do you work with annotated script? Do you receive that from your clients, or you do the annotation yourself?
No, I do them mostly when I get these kind of situations. I do them myself. There was a very special case. It was I had a character that I was acting. I mean, I was the voice actor for that character, but the translations were so detached. They were so, rushed that we had to change everything during the recording because my character was a character that referenced lots of TV shows from the United States. And of course, you're like in Latin America, no one will know which shows he's talking about. Some of them, yeah, some of them got here, and you could research it. Okay, what was this show called in Latin America? Okay, so we can mention it with that title. But in other cases, he was mentioning and referencing talk shows or TV series which never made it to the Latin audience. So you need to adapt that if you want to preserve the essence of the character. And in this case, it was a comedy. So in order to be funny, there's I hate it when this happens. There's nothing worse than when the jokes don't land because the translation doesn't make sense.
Correct.
You,
So you
it's
have
so
to
difficult
adapt
to
the
adapt
humor. You have
comedies.
to adapt the jokes. You have to adapt. Sometimes the script is mentioning a political figure in one country. You have no
Exactly.
idea about what they are talking about in Argentina. So you need to find an
Hmm.
equivalent. You need to find
Yeah.
something that will make it in your country. So people don't realize how important is the adaptation in the dubbing process.
Yeah.
It's really the basic. It's a basis. If you don't have that, you cannot move forward.
Hmm.
Listen, tell me a little bit about the Latin Spanish production versus the Hollywood production. Because you mentioned earlier that sometimes you are working on film from Chile, from Colombia, and I was in Africa last month. I was in Nigeria, and in Nigeria, the industry is called Nollywood, not Hollywood, Nollywood for Nigeria. And
Hmm.
these people produce 2,000 movies a year. Do you know that?
Wow.
I had no idea before I went there. It's as big as Bollywood, which is
Wow.
the Indian industry. The only problem is that these people are producing a lot of content, but the content stays in their region. It doesn't travel a lot.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about the Latin production. How big is it? Are you involved with that? And is it traveling outside of Latin America?
Well, each one of our countries in Latin America produce series and movies. Sadly, in Argentina, this has been decreasing a lot during the last years. Currently, the biggest TV studio, which produced a lot of TV series and soap operas and a lot all those things, they closed because of the economic crisis. So mostly lately, TV movies and TV series are produced by the big platforms. You have Netflix, you have Prime Video, you have HBO. So uh, through those platforms, some national content is produced,
Yes.
but it has decreased. It has decreased a lot lately. Um, in Chile, we also had some shows lately, some police shows that came up and they're very good. Mexico, of course, has the biggest industry in regards to that. But I feel that in that way, we are not producing, of course, we're not producing together. We're not working together in order to produce more Latin movies, but each country is on their own. And yes, maybe here we get one Mexican movie in during the year, and the other way around. I'm sure that in Mexico, not many Argentinian movies are shown during the
And
year.
these movies are released in Spanish, obviously. So, in terms of dubbing, would you dub that in other languages? Maybe in Portuguese for Brazil, is the same continent?
Yes, yes. Well, here in Argentina, it's funny because we get a lot of Argentinian movies that we have to dub them into Latin Spanish. So it's almost the same, but we have to dub them into Latin Spanish to
No,
make them
really.
more
Also,
exportable.
so the
Yes,
Argentinian movies are dubbed in Latin Spanish, in neutral
yes,
Spanish.
yes, yes,
Interesting.
yes,
Why?
yes. We have a lot of that,
Because
and
because it doesn't go well on TV.
I could say that because our slang is not so understandable, but my line of thought is that the client decided that in order to sell this product, the best thing to do is to
Hey,
dub it in Latin Spanish. I'm
good
not
for
sure if
you.
that works, but of course, work is work.
Yeah, absolutely. That
Yeah.
reminds me what's going on in Canada, in Quebec, on
Hmm.
the French part. Um, they have on TV a lot of French. So French is accepted in the Quebec TV, but the other way around doesn't work. So in
Mm.
French TV, you don't see Canadian content, but you see
Okay,
French content in Canadian TV.
of course.
So that's not exactly the same, but it's a bit the same concept. You have to
Yeah.
change. That's very interesting. So how big is the production in Latin America? Like what, a few thousand movies a year, something like that, or not even?
I couldn't be sure about Latin America, but at least in Argentina, no, no. I believe of course, we're talking about mostly big productions, right? Because there must be lots of small movies, independent movies that are produced, but there was a very symbolic cinema that we had here in Buenos Aires that was the only cinema that projected a lot of independent movies. So you knew that, okay, if I want to support this creator, this filmmaker, I should go there to watch this movie. Well, that cinema called the Gaumont was
Gaumont,
closed.
yeah, the big one.
Yeah, it was closed. This new government decided it was not worthy keeping it open, and they closed it. So we're facing a very difficult moment in culture here right now. As I said, things are getting more and more expensive. So producing quality cinema is getting really hard, really, really hard. Um,
Unfortunately, and we saw that in a lot of countries. And I know you had a little bit of a controversial election lately, to say the least. And I'm not going to talk about that. The Bing
it's okay.
Academy doesn't do politics. But in a lot of countries where you have economic crisis, this we can say that there is an economic crisis. the first one to get hammered is the cultural. It's not the defense, it's not the workers, it's the culture. The culture is always the first one having the budget reduced, because most of the government in time of crisis don't feel that this is very important. So the first thing to cut is
Hmm.
the culture, unfortunately. Tell me a little
Yeah.
bit about you are so you are a teacher, an acting teacher, let's say,
Hmm.
Um and as you know, we developed the dubbing academy here at Transperfect, and we work also on Studio Next. You probably, because I know you went to our facility in Buenos Aires, Transperfect Studio, so you know the studio very well. You've been there. Um, Tell me about your the first time you saw the Ritmo band on Studio Next, because my experience is a lot of people don't know what the Ritmo band is, but as soon as they try, they say, "Wow, that's so simple. We should have done that earlier." And the French started to do the Ritmo band. They invented the Ritmo band in the late 30s. So this is not a new concept. It was on film before. Now it's on the computer, but it's the same concept. It's the text scrolling from right to left. So, what's your approach? Do you like that? Do you think that it's a good potential for the lip sync? Tell me a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, personally, I'm very adaptive. I mean, I understand that technology evolves, and well, there's a whole theme with artificial intelligence right now, and
That's
okay,
another
let's
subject.
yes, let's not go there for now. But I believe that, of course, after the pandemic, technologies changed and adapted a lot, and we had to learn how to work at home and to be able to manage the new software and the new the new technologies basically that we had to learn to understand and manage. And something that also changed was that we usually had the script, a printed
Yeah,
script. We had it here in front of us so we could take notes and we
I
mugged, and
know.
suddenly now we had it on screen. And that, of course, is difficult, it's hard, and it's also good in an ecological way of thinking, and of course, not using so much paper, etc. But I think the most important thing is to be a team, you know, and to be able to rely on the translation and to rely that, of course, if I have this text that goes through in this specific speed, and to be sure that the translation and the adaptation is going to be okay, and I'm not going to be no what happened, no let's go again, I cannot
That's
read
a
it,
very good point.
oh.
That's a very good point.
So we need to have a good teamwork in order to make that kind of technologies work in the best way and to make it easier for us.
And that's a very good point, and we addressed that like 6 7 months ago in Studio Next. Now you can change the text live.
Yeah.
You can change the rhythm band text before
Yeah.
you record. If you try and you see that, because the concept is you have a sentence scrolling in front of you, so you can read it in sync, which is great. But between the in and the out of the sentence, you can
Hmm.
put 10 words or you can put 20 words, obviously.
Yeah.
If you put 20 words, you cannot
Yeah.
do it because it's too fast. I know the Spanish
Yeah.
are speaking very fast, but you have some limits.
Yeah.
So that's why we changed the program, and now people can rewrite the sentence before recording to see if it's, you know, I've been everywhere doing dubbing when I was working for Warner before joining Transperfect 5 years ago. And
Hmm.
basically, I never saw one session where we didn't change something.
Of course.
you always have to change something, and not because the adaptation is not good. Sometimes adaptation is good, but it doesn't flow very well on the mouth of the actor. It's you cannot say it a good way, so you change, you put another word, and we all know by speaking some by speaking different languages, but you can say the same thing in a language two, three, four different ways. So this is not a problem, as long as you
Yeah,
are
I
true
think
to the story.
Yeah, I think that's why the position of the director is so important, because the director ultimately is the one who decides what stays and what doesn't. And as a translator, I used to put my twist in things and to say, okay, I want this character to use this word instead of this one. And later on, maybe I watched the movie after it was recorded, and they changed it, and I'm like, no, I thought that I consciously made a decision about that. Why did they change it? And maybe the director just says, I didn't like the lip sync, or the actors
Could
found
not
it
say it
hard
well.
to.
Yeah,
Yeah. So we all need to be giving the best of us, but ultimately the director is going to be the one who makes the last call. And we, in order for that to work, we need to do the best work we can as translators, as actors, as adapters. So the director receives the material and goes, okay, I can work with this. There's nothing worse than to receive a translation that makes you stop at every phrase. No, no, okay, okay, let's go again. No,
yeah,
this is
yeah, of
too much text.
course. No,
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 there's text missing. Okay, working that way, makes
correct.
your head explode.
Correct. And that's
So.
true that you are absolutely right, because the director has a global view of the final product. The translator has a view of the movie because they do the adaptation, but they rarely hear how it's going to sound between the characters, depending on the attitude of the character. So, yes, you're absolutely right. Um, Only the one with the final view should have the final
Mhm.
word, in fact. Tell me a little bit to finish what you think about what's going on in Latin America now, not only in Argentina, but the rest of the country. We touch it a little bit. How do you see the
Mhm.
next 5 years?
Well, it's hard because of this situation that we mentioned before about the artificial intelligence. We are very scared. We voice actors are very scared about what will happen with our job. We are artists, and we understand that art needs to be made by humans. Of course, technology can be a tool. It should help. It should make things easier. Of course, we understand that. But ultimately, I believe that we need to be united along audiences to please keep humans doing art. I believe I'm also a drawing artist, and I see that all the time.
I know.
Drawing artists are being replaced, voice actors are being replaced, translators are being replaced. So we need to find a way to use these tools in our best advantage, but not to lose our jobs and not to lose the human factor in that. And I can see that is making us very united in Latin America. I have been talking with a lot of people from different countries. We are all worried. We're all, working in order to step on this and be. Ultimately, we say, if we do things well, if we work in a great way, if we produce great material, then it will be less probable that they change us
Yeah,
for machines.
and dubbing is such a niche market. It's not a
Yeah.
huge market. It's a niche market. It's a very creative and artistic market. So 20 years ago, when the first machine translation came, everybody said we are not going to have translators anymore. And now, as you can see by yourself, we are looking for translator adapters for movie because the machine translation cannot adapt the movie. And this is 20 years after. So
Yeah.
and I wrote a few articles on LinkedIn. I invite our viewers to go on LinkedIn and look for my articles on AI. I did at least two articles lately on AI, and I explained that the actors will always be acting. The AI can do a first pass, like the machine translation, but you cannot let the machine decide for you. So maybe the role of the actor will change. You will have some different kind of actors, but the actors will be there. That's no doubt about that. So I don't, because dubbing is too specialized.
I think the same, but last year was a very difficult year. We well, of course we had the strike in Hollywood, so that made a lot of work stop.
Yeah,
That affected us a lot. So it was okay. The rise of AI, the strike in Hollywood. What I'm gonna do? I
and I
should buy a
was.
farm. I don't know.
And I was on the Warner lot last week because I was in LA last week and I went to see my former colleagues and the lot was very quiet. And I told them, wow, normally when I was there, it was moving like ants, bum, bum, bum. And
Hmm.
that was very calm. And it didn't start going, it didn't go back to the normal activity that they had before the strike. So the strike is damaged a lot of business for sure. But little by little, it's coming back, and hopefully for you, Latin America and Argentina will be on the rise. The good thing
Please.
is when you go too low, well, you can only
Yeah.
go up after.
Yeah. We are used to that. We are a country that is very used to punches and
Oh,
getting up
yes.
again, but
But
it's
this is
difficult.
not
I
new.
mean,
The economic crisis in Argentina is not new. I
no.
always know that. I always saw that. It's very
Yeah,
difficult.
yeah. The last time I remember that this kind of crisis happened, I was a teenager and I lived it through my parents. Now I am a father, so I'm living it in a very different
Oh, absolutely,
moment.
absolutely.
So it's just you have to talk to the elder people and okay, how did you do back then? What did you do to survive? And of course, we need to be very smart and we need to be adaptive and we need to be able to grab everything that we can and make and change it for the best. So that's my vision of things. And when I teach my students that they need to be flexible, adaptive. They need to be able to give the directors what they ask from you. Being an actor is also that you are a tool that you're used to transmit a
Yeah,
message. It could be a movie, it could be a play, it could be
and it's
dubbing,
not your
but you need to
movie;
be
it's a movie
there.
of the director.
Of course, of course, of course. That's we also need to remember our egos need to remember that
Exactly.
too. It's not it's very hard, but yeah, we try.
Look, 48 minutes. It was a long discussion, which I really enjoyed, and I hope our viewers enjoyed it too. That was great. You know what, Alejandro? I think I'm going to do in the next weeks, months, a panel on AI because I see that this is something that everybody is very concerned about, and uh,
Hmm.
and you seem having a very good having a firm opinion about AI. So I will invite you, if you are okay, on a
Of
discussion
course.
panel on AI. I want to have
Of course.
a few actors, directors, translators, and we'll brainstorm about AI and see what we can do together. Because I'm
Please.
very involved in the subject here at Transperfect, and we obviously, because of the Dubbing Academy, we are training actor. So it's not to replace the actor that we are training with AI, obviously. So,
Yeah.
so Alejandro, thank you so much. This was, and for our friend, it was episode 15, dubbing in Latin Spanish in Latin America, I would say.
Hmm.
And good luck. Good luck for your work. I know you are in difficult situation, but I'm sure you will do well because you are very well known. And when you go and record in our studio at Transperfect Buenos Aires, let me know. So we have a
Yeah.
little discussion with Javi, our manager there. Uh,
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and
Thank you.
thank you everybody for joining, and see you next month. Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.